Welcome to my channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The elevator button was there. I know it was there because my thumb pressed it, and that's when everything went wrong. But wait, before I tell you what happened in that Manhattan high-rise last Tuesday night, I need you to do something for me. Check the elevator in your building. Count the floors. Notice how many skip from 12 to 14. They'll tell you it's superstition, bad luck, that people won't rent on the 13th floor. They're lying. And if you find a building that actually shows the 13th floor, whatever you do, don't press that button. Not unless you want to end up like me, hearing things in the walls, seeing shadows that shouldn't exist, knowing that somewhere between the 12th and 14th floor, there's a space that was never meant for the living. Still want to hear what happened? Good, because someone needs to know the truth. Hit that subscribe button if you dare, because after this story, you'll never ride an elevator the same way again. And now, the story begins. My name is Marcus Chen, and I moved to New York City 3 years ago with nothing but a journalism degree and enough savings to survive 2 months. Last Tuesday, I thought I'd finally caught my break. An interview at Steinberg Media Group, 32nd floor of the Chrysler Building. Well, not the actual Chrysler Building, but one of those sleek glass towers in Midtown that tries so hard to look important. The kind with a marble lobby that echoes your footsteps. Security guards who look through you like you're made of air, and elevators that move so smooth you can't tell if you're going up or down. I should mention something about my background, something I didn't think was relevant until later. My grandmother, Nai, came from a long line of what she called sensitive people. People who saw things others couldn't, felt things others missed. She always warned me about places where the spiritual world bled through into ours. Hotels with too many mirrors. Buildings with no corners that felt quite right. Elevators that hummed in frequencies that made your teeth ache. Growing up, I dismissed it as old superstition. Rural Chinese folklore that had no place in modern New York. But standing in that marble lobby at 7:43 a.m., I felt something my rational mind couldn't explain. The building felt hungry. The lobby was mostly empty, just me, a security guard scrolling through his phone, and a woman in a gray suit waiting by the elevator banks. She kept checking her watch, tapping her heel. The sound echoed off the marble like a countdown. Tap, tap, tap. But there was something else, a rhythm underneath the tapping, like a heartbeat, like the building itself was breathing. I pulled out my phone to check the time and noticed something odd. The building's Wi-Fi network was called floor_13_guest, with no password required. I'd never seen a building advertise a 13th floor before. Most pretended it didn't exist. I made a mental note to ask about it during the interview. The elevator dinged. We both stepped in. The woman smelled like expensive perfume layered over something else, something organic, like flowers left too long in standing water. She pressed 23. I reached for 32, but my hand stopped. Between the buttons for 12 and 14, there was another button, worn brass. The number 13 barely visible, like someone had tried to scratch it off, but it was there. The metal was warm under my finger, and too warm, like it had been touched recently by someone with a fever. "You see it too," the woman said. Not a question, a statement. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Her face was wrong somehow, like she was wearing makeup that was just a shade too pale. Her eyes were the color of old ice. But more disturbing was the way she stood perfectly still. No fidgeting, no unconscious swaying. People in elevators always move slightly. She didn't. "The 13th floor," I said, my voice catching. "But buildings don't." "Most don't," she interrupted. "Most are smart enough to seal it off, brick it up, pretend it never existed." She stepped closer. I could smell her perfume, something floral, but underneath, something else. Like old paper, like dust, like things that had been buried too long. But some buildings forget to hide their sins. The elevator started moving. I hadn't pressed anything yet. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She smiled. Her teeth were perfect. Too perfect. Like they'd been filed to precise points. "You're a journalist, aren't you, Marcus?" I never told her my name. The temperature in the elevator dropped 10 degrees. I could see my breath in small puffs. The woman didn't seem to notice. "How did you—" "I know all about you. Your blog posts about urban legends. Your fascination with the hidden history of New York." She pulled out a business card. Black cardstock. No company name, just an address and a time. The address was the same building we were in. The time was 4:17 p.m. "Your apartment in Brooklyn, your student loan debt, your rejection letters from the Times, the Post, the Village Voice." My blood went cold. That information wasn't public, wasn't online anywhere. "Your grandmother's stories," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "About the spaces between worlds. About buildings that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. She knew things, didn't she? Saw things others couldn't see. Nai had been dead for 5 years. I'd never written about her stories, never told anyone about them. After your interview, if you're curious about the real story of this city, press the button." She held out the card. It was ice cold to the touch. The elevator stopped, 23rd floor. She stepped out, then turned back. "Oh, and Marcus, whatever you do, don't tell anyone what you find. They won't believe you anyway, and we prefer it that way." The doors closed. I stood there, alone, staring at that worn brass button. 13. My grandmother always said 13 was unlucky. My rational mind said it was just a number. But standing there, in that softly humming elevator box suspended between floors, I felt something else. Curiosity and hunger. Like the building was calling to me. I pressed 32, went to my interview. The interview itself was surreal. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a mid-tier media company. Open floor plan, exposed brick walls, motivational posters about synergy and thinking outside the box. But everyone I met seemed to be acting out a role. Their smiles were too wide, their handshakes too firm, their eye contact too intense. The hiring manager, a woman named Janet Friedman, asked standard questions about my experience, my goals, my familiarity with content management systems. But every few minutes, she'd throw in something strange. "How do you feel about working on projects that might not technically exist? Are you comfortable with non-disclosure agreements that extend beyond traditional legal boundaries? Have you ever experienced temporal displacement? Lost time? Memories that don't quite align with reality?" I answered as professionally as possible, assuming these were personality tests or creative writing assessments. The media industry was known for its eccentric interview processes. They offered me the job on the spot. Content writer, $58,000 a year, benefits, the works. Everything I'd moved to New York for. But as I signed the paperwork, I noticed something odd. The contract had standard employment language, but buried in the fine print were clauses I'd never seen before. Employee agrees to maintain confidentiality regarding any interdimensional workplace activities. Employee acknowledges that work assignments may occur on floors that do not appear on standard building directories. Employee waives right to seek employment termination based on metaphysical job requirements. I laughed it off as legal humor. Some companies had lawyers with too much time on their hands. But I couldn't stop thinking about that button. Instead of going home to celebrate, I spent the afternoon at the New York Public Library. If I was going to press that button, I wanted to know what I was getting into. The research started simple. Building codes, when and why buildings started omitting the 13th floor. The usual explanations. Superstition dating back to the Last Supper, Norse mythology about Loki being the 13th god, general Western fear of the number. But then I dug deeper. In the basement archives, I found records that didn't make sense. Building permits for floors that shouldn't exist. Electrical work orders for floor 13, section K through P. Elevator maintenance reports mentioning unusual vertical displacement between floors 12 and 14. Most disturbing were the missing persons reports. Dozens of them going back decades. People who'd last been seen entering office buildings in Manhattan. Security cameras showed them entering elevators, but they never appeared on any floor. Building security insisted their elevators were functioning normally. No mechanical issues. No record of anyone getting stuck between floors. The missing people had a few things in common. They were all ambitious, all desperate for a breakthrough, all alone in the city with few close connections who'd notice if they disappeared for a while. I found newspaper clippings from the 1970s about a 13th floor society that met in various Manhattan buildings. The meetings were invitation only. The society claimed to offer opportunities for advancement beyond traditional career paths. Several business leaders and politicians were rumored members, though none admitted it publicly. The society's last recorded meeting was in 1978. After that, no more newspaper mentions, no more meeting announcements, like they'd simply vanished. But I found something else, something that made my hands shake as I read it. A digitized journal entry from a construction worker who'd helped build the tower where I'd had my interview, written in 1963 during the building's construction. Strange thing happened today. Boss told us to skip the 13th floor. Said the blueprints were wrong, that we were supposed to go straight from 12 to 14, but I could swear we'd already poured concrete for 13. Could swear I'd been working on that floor for weeks. When I asked the other guys, they looked at me like I was crazy. Said there never was a 13th floor planned. But I remember it. I remember the way the air felt different up there. Heavier, like it was pressing down on us from somewhere else. I photographed everything. Printed what I could. By the time I left the library, it was 4:15 p.m. 2 minutes until the time on the business card, 4:17 p.m. Same day. I should have been celebrating. Should have been calling my mom, telling her I'd finally made it. Instead, I was back in that building, standing in the same elevator, staring at the same brass button. The lobby was busy now, rush hour starting, people flooding out, heading home. Nobody paying attention to one more guy in a wrinkled suit, standing in an elevator not moving. My finger hovered over 13. I thought about my grandmother's stories, about places where the world grew thin, about doors that opened onto other versions of reality. She'd always said the most dangerous places were the ones that looked completely normal, the ones that invited you in. Just press it, I thought. What's the worst that could happen? I pressed it. For a moment, nothing. Then the elevator shuddered. Not like it was broken. Like it was deciding something. The lights flickered. The display above the door went dark. And then we were moving, but not up, not down, sideways. I know how that sounds. Impossible. Elevators don't move sideways. But I felt it in my stomach, that weird lurching sensation, like when a plane hits turbulence. The walls seemed to press in closer. The air got thick, heavy, like breathing underwater. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. The 13th floor looked normal. That was the worst part. It looked completely normal. Beige carpet, fluorescent lights, a reception desk with nobody behind it, motivational posters on the walls, excellence through impossibility, and achieving the unachievable. But something was wrong with the silence. It wasn't just quiet. It was like sound itself had been sucked out of the air. When I snapped my fingers, the sound was muffled, like I was wearing earplugs. I stepped out. The elevator doors closed behind me immediately. When I turned back, there was no call button, no elevator doors, just a solid wall with a faded fire exit map showing floors that included fractions and negative numbers. Hello? My voice sounded muffled, like speaking underwater. The hallway stretched out in both directions. Office doors lined both sides. Each one had a nameplate, but the names, they were all wrong. Not foreign, not made up, just wrong. Like someone had taken regular names and shifted them slightly. Robert Johnson, Patricia Smith, Michael Davis. I walked to the nearest door, tried the handle, locked. But through the frosted glass I could see shapes moving. People, working at desks, typing, having meetings, all in complete silence. The typing had no sound, but I could feel it. A rhythmic vibration through the floor, like dozens of people typing in perfect synchronization. I knocked. The shapes stopped moving, all of them, at exactly the same time. They turned toward the door, toward me. I couldn't see their faces through the frosted glass, but I could feel them looking. The silence hushed and stretched for 30 seconds. Then, as one, they turned back to their work. The typing resumed. I tried the next door, same thing, and the next, and the next. Then I heard it, a phone ringing, somewhere down the hall. An old phone, the kind with an actual bell. Ring, ring, ring. I followed the sound, past more offices with wrong names, past a water cooler that bubbled without making noise, past a printer that was printing page after page of solid black, past a bulletin board covered with job postings for positions like reality maintenance specialist and temporal consistency coordinator. The ringing got louder. At the end of the hall, one door was open, just a crack. Light spilled out. Not fluorescent light, something warmer, like candlelight. I pushed the door open. Inside was an office from another time. Wood paneling, green banker's lamp, a massive oak desk covered with papers written in languages I didn't recognize. And behind it, an old rotary phone, black, ringing. On the walls were photographs, dozens of them, all showing the same building I was in but taken from impossible angles, from above the clouds, from inside solid concrete, from perspectives that shouldn't exist. I picked up the phone. "Marcus Chen," a voice said. My voice, but older, tired. "You shouldn't have come here. Who is this?" "You know who this is." "I'm you, 5 years from now. Still working on the 13th floor. Still trying to find a way out." My hand started shaking. That's not possible. None of this is possible. But here we are. A pause. I could hear breathing. My breathing, but different. Heavier. "Listen carefully. You have about 3 minutes before they notice you're here. The real workers. The ones who accepted the job." "What job?" "Every building has a 13th floor, Marcus. It's where the real work happens. The work that keeps the city running. The deals that nobody can know about. The decisions that shape reality. And they need employees, people who won't be missed, people who were desperate enough to press the button. Through the office window, I could see Manhattan, but it wasn't the Manhattan I knew. The buildings were taller, stranger. Some seemed to grow directly from the ground like enormous trees. Others hung suspended in the air, connected by bridges made of light. "They're coming," the voice said. "Get out. Get to the stairwell. Don't look at them. Don't speak to them. And whatever you do, don't accept anything they offer you." How do I get out? The stairs. But Marcus, once you leave, you can never tell anyone. They'll know if you do. They always know. What happens if I stay? A long pause. You become part of the system. You help maintain the hidden infrastructure of reality. You process the impossible paperwork that keeps the world from noticing its own contradictions. And after a while, you forget there was ever any other way to live. The line went dead. I heard footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, walking in perfect synchronization. But there was something wrong with the rhythm. Too many steps per person, like they had more feet than they should. Step, 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 step. I ran. The footsteps followed me, not running, just walking. But somehow they were getting closer, and I could hear breathing now. Multiple sets of lungs, but all breathing at exactly the same time. I turned a corner, another hallway, identical to the first. More offices, more wrong names. But at the end, a red exit sign. As I ran, I passed a break room. The door was open. Inside, people sat around a conference table, having what looked like a normal business meeting. Except they were all wearing the same face. Literally. The exact same face, like masks mass-produced in a factory. And they were all taking notes with their left hands while their right hands moved in identical gestures, conducting an invisible orchestra. The stairwell door was heavy. Metal. The kind they use for fire exits. I pulled it open and stumbled inside. The stairs went up and down, but also in directions that stairs shouldn't go. Some twisted into spirals that hurt to look at. Others seemed to go up and down at the same time. The walls were covered with signs pointing to floors that didn't make sense. Floor 7.5, floor -3, floor infinity, floor yesterday, floor when. I started climbing, or descending. I couldn't tell anymore. Each landing had a door with a floor number, but the numbers made no sense. And through the windows in the stairwell I could see other versions of New York. In one, the city was underwater. In another, the buildings were made of glass and light. In a third, giant vines had grown through the concrete, turning Manhattan into a vertical jungle. My legs burned. My chest felt tight. But I kept moving. Then I saw her, the woman from the elevator this morning, standing on a landing above me, or below me. Space didn't work right here. "You actually came," she said. She looked different now, older, or younger, both at the same time. Her face kept shifting slightly, like I was seeing multiple versions of her superimposed. "What is this place?" "The real New York," she said. "The one that exists in the spaces between spaces. Every city has one. Paris, London, Tokyo. Places where the impossible work gets done, where reality gets adjusted. I want out." She laughed. It sounded like breaking glass, like wind through empty buildings. "There's only one way out. You take the job, you work here, you become one of us. Never. Then you run. Forever. Because now that you've seen it, you're marked. Every elevator you enter, there's a chance you'll end up here. Every stairwell might lead back. Every door might open to the 13th floor." The footsteps were getting closer. I could see shadows on the walls. Too many arms, too many legs, moving in ways that human shadows shouldn't move. "Unless," she said, Unless what? You forget. Completely. Utterly. Forget you were ever here. Forget the 13th floor exists. Some people can do it. Convince themselves it was a dream. A hallucination. Stress from the job interview. She pulled out a small glass vial. Clear liquid inside. Drink this. Wake up in the lobby. Never remember. I reached for it, then I remembered the voice on the phone. My voice. Don't accept anything they offer you. No, I said. Her face changed. Anger. Disappointment. Something else. Something hungry. Then run, Marcus Chen. Run and never stop running. Because we'll be waiting. In every elevator, behind every door, in every shadow between floors, I ran, down stairs that shouldn't exist, through doors that opened onto nothing, past windows that showed New York from angles that weren't possible, the city from below, from inside, from dimensions that human eyes weren't meant to see. Behind me, the footsteps multiplied. Now it sounded like dozens of people, all walking in that same impossible rhythm. And I could hear voices, my voice, calling my name, trying to convince me to stop, to turn around, to accept their offer. Finally, I saw it. A door marked with a simple L. Lobby. I grabbed the handle. It was hot, burning, like metal left in the sun all day. But I turned it anyway. I fell through. I woke up on the marble floor of the lobby. Security guards standing over me. Concerned faces. Someone asking if I was okay, if I needed an ambulance. What time is it? I asked. 4:23, someone said. 6 minutes. I'd been gone 6 minutes. I'm fine, I lied. Just low blood sugar. Forgot to eat lunch. They helped me up. Got me some water from the security desk. I sat there shaking, trying to make sense of what happened. Stress, I told myself. Hallucination. Too much coffee. Not enough sleep. But when I looked at the elevator bank, the button was gone. Where the 13 had been, just smooth brass, like it never existed. I took the job at Steinberg Media, started the next Monday. Normal office. Normal people. Everything completely normal. Except sometimes, when I work late, I hear the elevators moving when nobody's called them. Hear them stop at floors that don't exist. Except sometimes, in the reflection of my computer screen, I see offices that aren't there. People working in silence, typing reports that reshape reality. Except sometimes, I get emails from addresses that don't exist. From Marcus Chen, 2029 at floor13.nyc. Always the same message. Still here? Still looking for a way out. I delete them. I pretend I don't see them. I take the stairs now. Always the stairs. Even to the 32nd floor. But last night I found something that made me write this down. Made me need to tell someone, even if they won't believe me. I was cleaning out my jacket pocket, the suit I wore to the interview, and I found something. A business card. Black cardstock. No company name. But now there was writing on the back. In my handwriting. But I didn't write it. It said, "The 13th floor exists in every building. Even yours. Even your apartment. Check your elevator at 3:33 a.m. The button will be there. It's always there for those who've seen it once." I live on the 6th floor of a walk-up in Brooklyn. We don't have an elevator. But last night at 3:32 a.m., I heard it. The ding. The doors opening. In my hallway, where no elevator should be. I didn't look. Pulled my covers over my head like a child. Waited until sunrise. But tonight I might look. Because the curiosity is killing me. Because I need to know if it was real. Because maybe the only way out is through. Or maybe that's what they want me to think. I couldn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, I started investigating, carefully, quietly, using my position at Steinberg Media to access building records, construction documents, anything that might explain what I'd experienced. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The building where I work? It was constructed on the site of an older building that had mysteriously collapsed in 1953. 47 people died. But here's the strange part. According to death certificates, all 47 victims died on the 13th floor. A floor that, according to the building's official blueprints, never existed. The insurance investigation was buried. The construction company responsible went out of business 3 days after the collapse. Every executive and contractor involved either left the city or died within a year of the incident. I found similar patterns across Manhattan. Buildings collapsing mysteriously, always on the 13th floor, always covered up, always forgotten. And the people I'd seen in those frosted glass offices? I started recognizing faces. Missing persons from the 1960s, 70s, 80s. People who'd vanished without a trace, last seen entering elevators in buildings across the city. They were still there, still working, still typing those reports that reshape reality. I tried to document everything, but that's when I noticed something disturbing. Every photo I took of the evidence came out blurred. Every document I tried to copy would jam the machine. Every digital file would corrupt as soon as I tried to save it. They knew I was investigating, and they were making sure I couldn't prove anything. But I found one thing they couldn't stop me from documenting. A pattern in the city itself. Buildings with 13th floors formed a network across Manhattan, connected by underground tunnels that didn't appear on any city maps. A hidden infrastructure that ran parallel to the normal city. The tunnels had been built in the early 1900s during the construction of the subway system. But these weren't for trains. They were for something else. Something that needed to move unseen between the impossible spaces. I traced the network to its center, a building in Lower Manhattan that was older than the rest, pre-war. The kind of place where the lobby smelled like old wood and the elevators had brass gates instead of automatic doors. The building directory listed floors 1 through 22, but I counted the windows from outside. 23 floors. That's where I am now, writing this in the lobby. The security guard fell asleep an hour ago. The elevator is waiting. The brass gate is open, and I can see it. The button marked 13. Glowing slightly in the dim light. If you're still listening, if you made it this far, do me a favor. Next time you're in an elevator, really look at the buttons, count the floors, and if you see a 13 that shouldn't be there, remember my story. Remember that some doors, once opened, can never really be closed. Remember that every city has its secrets, its hidden floors, its impossible spaces where the real work gets done. And remember, I warned you, because I can hear it again, right now. As I'm recording this, the elevator in my hallway, the one that doesn't exist, dinging, the doors opening, and footsteps. Footsteps coming closer. But I'm not running this time. I'm going to press the button. I'm going to find out what they really want. What they're really doing in those offices between reality. Maybe I'll find a way to stop them. Maybe I'll find a way to free the others. Or maybe I'll just become another shadow typing reports that remake the world. But I have to know. The curiosity is killing me. And maybe that's exactly what they've been waiting for. Recording ends. Wait, do you hear that? That humming sound? Like an elevator moving? Check your building. Check it right now. Count the floors. And whatever you do, actually, you know what? Press it. Press the button. See for yourself. Because nobody ever believes. Not until they see. Not until they experience it themselves. And once you do, once you finally understand, you'll realize why every city needs its 13th floor, why every building has that space between spaces. We're waiting for you. All of us who pressed the button, all of us who couldn't resist, all of us who are still here, working in silence, typing reports that remake reality, one keystroke at a time. Join us, won't you? The button is there. It's always been there. You just have to look. Static. Silence. Subscribe if you dare to hear more stories from the spaces between spaces. Comment if you've seen the 13th floor. And share this before they make me take it down, before they make me forget, before I become just another shadow working in silence on the floor that doesn't exist. Story number 2. The speedometer needle was buried past empty when I finally saw the Sinclair dinosaur glowing green against the desert darkness. I should have kept driving, even on fumes, even if it meant walking 20 miles to the next town. Because some gas stations along Route 66, they're not really there to sell you gas. Before you click away, before you tell yourself this is just another campfire story, I need you to listen. Really listen. Because if you ever find yourself on that old highway, especially the forgotten stretches through Arizona and New Mexico, you need to know the rules. The ones the attendants won't tell you, the ones they can't tell you. Comment below if you've ever felt that crawling sensation at a gas station late at night. That feeling that something's watching from behind the cigarette displays. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Because, trust me, this is just the beginning. And now, the story begins. My name's Jake, and 3 weeks ago, I was just another college kid driving back to Phoenix after visiting my grandmother in Albuquerque. I'd made this drive a dozen times before, always during the day. But Grandma had needed me to stay longer, help her sort through some old papers, and by the time I left, the sun was already kissing the horizon. I knew better than to let the tank get that low. My dad had drilled it into me since I got my license. Never let it drop below a quarter tank, Jake. Especially not out there. But I'd passed 2 stations already, thinking I could make it to the cheaper one near Flagstaff. Stupid. So incredibly stupid. The needle had been on E for the last 15 miles when I saw it. The green Brontosaurus sign cutting through the darkness like a lighthouse. Morrison's Sinclair Station. I'd never noticed it before on any of my previous trips, but then again, I'd never been looking this desperately. The place looked exactly like you'd imagine an old Route 66 gas station would look. 2 pumps that probably hadn't been updated since the 80s. A small convenience store with flickering fluorescent lights, and a garage bay with its door half open, revealing nothing but darkness inside. The kind of place that probably did most of its business from desperate travelers like me. I coasted in on fumes. Literally. The engine sputtered and died just as I reached the pump. Perfect timing, I thought. Lucky. I wasn't lucky. The attendant was already walking toward me before I even opened my door. That should have been my first warning. What gas station still has attendants who come out to the pumps? But I was too relieved to care. "Evening," he said, and his voice had this quality to it, like he was trying to remember how to sound friendly. He was maybe 60, wearing a Sinclair uniform that looked older than me, with a name tag that said Earl in faded letters. "Cutting it close, aren't you?" "Yeah," I laughed. That nervous kind of laugh you do when you know you've messed up. Thought I could make it to Flagstaff. Earl's smile didn't reach his eyes. They always think that. He started pumping the gas without me having to ask, which felt weird but also kind of nice. Old-fashioned service, you know? While the pump clicked away, he kept looking at me. Not in a creepy way exactly, but like he was trying to figure something out. "First time stopping here?" he asked. "Yeah. I usually drive through during the day." Something flickered across his face. Concern, maybe. "Well, There's things you should know about stopping here after dark. Rules. I thought he was joking. Some kind of tourist trap gimmick. Rules? He glanced toward the store, then back at me, leaned in closer. The smell of motor oil and something else, something organic and wrong, drifted off him. 3 rules, he whispered, and I could see his hands trembling slightly as he held the pump. First, don't look at the other customers too long. Second, if someone asks you for a ride, you say no, no matter what they look like, no matter what story they tell. And third, he paused, looked around again. If you hear knocking from the garage, don't acknowledge it. Don't even look that way. The pump clicked off. Full tank. Earl hung up the nozzle and stepped back. That'll be $47.50, he said, normal volume now, like he hadn't just been whispering about rules and knocking. I handed him my card, trying to process what he'd said. Is this some kind of bit? Like attract tourists with spooky stories? Earl's expression went flat. Sure, kid. Just a bit. He ran my card on an ancient manual machine, the kind where you have to press down hard to make the carbon copy. You need anything from inside? Water? Snacks? I did, actually. My throat was dry from the drive, and I hadn't eaten since lunch. Yeah, I'll grab something. Remember the rules? He said quietly as he handed back my card. The bell above the door made this wet, strangled sound when I pushed inside, like it was choking on something. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered, casting everything in this sickly greenish tint that made my skin look dead. The store was bigger than it looked from outside, aisles stretching back further than seemed possible. That old gas station smell hit me immediately. Burnt coffee, industrial cleaner, and underneath it all something sweet and rotten, like fruit that had been left in the sun too long. There were 3 other people inside. No, wait, I need to be precise about this. There were 3 other things that looked like people inside. The first was a woman near the chip aisle, middle-aged, wearing a floral dress that looked like it came straight from 1973. She was holding a bag of Fritos, just holding it. Not looking at it, not moving, just standing there with her hand on the bag. I could see her from the corner of my eye as I walked past, and I remembered Earl's first rule, don't look at the other customers too long. But God, it was hard not to stare, because even in my peripheral vision, I could tell something was wrong with how she was standing. Too still, like a mannequin someone had positioned there. The second was a man in a trucker cap by the coffee machine. He was pouring coffee into a cup, and the sound was wrong. Too thick, like syrup instead of liquid. The cup had been full for several seconds, but he kept pouring. It was overflowing, running down the sides, pooling on the floor. He didn't seem to notice. The third was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, standing by the candy display. He was wearing a Boy Scout uniform, complete with badges and everything. When I walked past, he turned to look at me, and his movement was too smooth, like his whole body rotated instead of just his head. "Mister," he said, and his voice was perfectly normal, which somehow made it worse. "My mom's car broke down outside. Can you give us a ride to the next town? Rule number 2, if someone asks for a ride, say no." "Sorry, kid," I managed, my mouth suddenly desert dry. "I can't." His expression didn't change, didn't show disappointment or sadness or anything. He just turned back to the candy display, smooth as a turntable, and continued standing there. I grabbed a water bottle from the cooler. The plastic was soft and warm, like it had been sitting in the sun, even though the cooler was humming and the other bottles looked cold. And made my way to the counter. Had to pass the woman with the Fritos again. This time, I couldn't help it. I looked. She was staring straight at me, had been the whole time, even when her body was facing the other direction. Her head was turned at an angle that wasn't quite right, and her eyes, Her eyes were all pupil. No iris, no white, just black circles that seemed to pull at the light around them. I jerked my gaze away, heart hammering. From behind me, I heard plastic crinkling. She was finally moving the Fritos bag, except the sound was too loud, too wet, like something else was crinkling along with the plastic. Just get to the counter, pay, leave. Earl was waiting for me, that same not quite right smile on his face. Find everything okay? Yeah, I croaked, setting the warm water bottle down. My hand was shaking. That's when I heard it. A knocking sound, steady, rhythmic, coming from the direction of the garage. Knock, 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 like someone tapping their knuckles against metal. I started to turn my head. That'll be $2.50, Earl said loudly, and something in his voice stopped me. A warning, a plea. Rule 3. If you hear knocking from the garage, don't acknowledge it. I fumbled for my wallet, dropped it, picked it up. The knocking got louder, more insistent, and now there was a voice with it, muffled but audible. Hello? Is someone there? I'm trapped. Please, someone help me. It sounded like a young woman, scared, desperate. $2.50, Earl repeated, and now I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the store being cold enough to see our breath. I handed him $3. Keep the change. Hello? Please, the door is stuck. I can smell gas. Please, someone. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to help, to run to the garage, to save whoever was trapped. My hand was already on the door handle when Earl spoke again. Son. His voice was barely a whisper. Get in your car. Drive away. Don't stop until you reach a town with streetlights. The woman's voice from the garage grew louder, more panicked. I can see you. I can see you through the window. Why won't you help me? Why won't anyone help me? But there were no windows in the garage door. I'd noticed that when I pulled in. I ran. The parking lot felt like it stretched for miles as I sprinted to my car. Behind me, the bell choked its wet sound as the door swung shut. The knocking from the garage had become pounding. Fierce, violent, making the whole building shake. Or maybe that was just my vision blurring from fear. I yanked open my car door and dove inside, locking it immediately. My hands were shaking so bad it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. In the rearview mirror, I could see the store. All 3 customers were now standing at the window, watching me. Just standing there, perfectly still, their faces pressed against the glass. The engine turned over. Thank God it started, and I threw it in drive. That's when I saw him. A man standing at the exit of the parking lot right in the middle of the driveway. He was wearing a sheriff's uniform, complete with badge and gun. His patrol car was parked sideways across the exit, blocking my path. He held up a hand as I approached, that universal stop gesture. Every part of me wanted to obey. He was a cop. You stop for cops. But Earl's words echoed in my head. Don't stop until you reach a town with streetlights. I slowed down, window still up, and got close enough to see his face in my headlights. His skin was too pale, with dark veins visible underneath like black rivers on a map. His eyes were human enough, but his smile had too many teeth. Rows and rows of them, like a shark's mouth pretending to be human. Evening, son, he said, and his voice came through my closed windows like they weren't even there. Need you to step out of the vehicle. Got reports of a theft at Morrison's. I looked in my rear view. Earl was standing outside the store now, frantically waving his arms. Not waving me back, waving me forward, urging me to go. Step out of the vehicle, the thing in the sheriff's uniform repeated, and now its hand was on its gun. I made a decision that probably saved my life. I floored it. The engine roared, tires squealed, and I swerved around the patrol car, tires hitting the desert dirt beside the road. The sheriff thing moved, fast, impossibly fast, reaching for my car as I passed. Its fingers scraped along the passenger door, and the sound was like nails on a chalkboard made of bones. In the mirror, I saw it standing in the road, watching me go. It didn't pursue, just stood there until the darkness swallowed it up. I drove 15 miles before I even thought about slowing down. My phone, which had shown no signal at Morrison's, suddenly came alive with texts and missed calls. All from the last hour, like they'd been held back and just now got through. One text was from my mom. "Where are you? Your GPS shows you've been sitting in the same spot for an hour." I looked at the time. 11:47 p.m. I'd pulled into Morrison's at 10:15. 30 minutes, maximum, had passed. I was sure of it. But my phone showed dozens of location pings, all from the same coordinates, time-stamped over the course of an hour. Like I'd been parked there, not moving, the whole time. I made it to Flagstaff a little after midnight, but I didn't go to Denny's like I originally wrote. That was a lie, I told myself, trying to make the story cleaner, more digestible. The truth is, I was too wired, too terrified to sit still. I drove straight to the 24-hour internet cafe on Route 66, the kind of place that caters to truckers and insomniacs. The fluorescent lights there were harsh and white, nothing like the sickly green glow of Morrison's. Real lights. Living lights. I bought 6 cups of coffee and claimed a computer terminal in the corner, where I could watch both the front door and the windows. That's when I started researching. Not just Morrison's Sinclair station, but the whole phenomenon. Because Earl's rules, they were too specific, too practiced, like he'd given them hundreds of times before. What I found made my blood turn to ice. The rules aren't unique to Morrison's. They're whispered at truck stops across the Southwest, scratched into bathroom stalls at rest areas, shared on obscure forums dedicated to highway mysteries. Always the same 3 rules with minor variations. Always along Route 66, always after dark. A forum called Desert Highway Survivors had 17 separate accounts from different years, different locations, but the same basic story. Gas stations that appeared when you needed them most, with attendants who knew things they shouldn't know. Customers who moved wrong. Sounds from places that should be empty. But Morrison's was special. It had the highest body count. I found a digitized police report from 1987. A family of 4 had stopped there for gas. The parents were found the next morning, sitting in their car at mile marker 167, staring straight ahead. Empty eye sockets. No sign of trauma, no sign of their children. The car's tank was full, the engine still running. 1991. A trucker reported picking up a hitchhiker near Morrison's. Young woman in a white dress said her car had broken down. When he looked in his passenger mirror 20 miles down the road, the seat was empty. But the smell remained, sweet and rotten, like fruit left in the sun. 1995. Search and rescue. Found a Boy Scout troop's van abandoned at the coordinates. All the doors were open, camping gear scattered in the desert wind. They found one scout 3 days later, 8 miles away, walking in circles. He kept asking for directions to the next town. When they told him he was safe, that they were taking him home, he smiled with too many teeth. The pattern was always the same. People would stop, some would leave safely, others didn't. But Earl was always there, warning the ones who would listen, the ones who might follow the rules. I found a blog post from 2003, written by a woman named Sarah Chen. The gas station attendant tried to tell me rules. I thought he was crazy. I should have listened. My boyfriend went to the garage to ask about getting our tire fixed. I haven't seen him since. The attendant just kept saying, "You should have told him the rules." Why didn't you tell him the rules? When the sun came up, the garage door was welded shut. Had been for years, they said. I spent 3 days in that internet cafe, reading every account I could find, mapping the disappearances, looking for patterns, and I found one that made me sick to my stomach. The disappearances came in cycles, 7 years apart, always in June, always starting on the 7th. The last cycle had ended in 2016, which meant I looked at the calendar on my phone. June 3rd, 2023, 4 days until the next cycle began. I should have left it alone, should have driven straight back to Phoenix and pretended none of it had happened. But I kept thinking about Earl, pumping gas 40 years after he died, still trying to warn people, still trying to save lives. And I thought about that voice from the garage. Why won't anyone help me? What if she was real? What if someone was really trapped in there, and Earl's rules were just wrong? I drove back on June 6th, spent the day at mile marker 167, walking the empty desert in broad daylight. Found nothing but sand and scrub brush. No foundation, no debris, no sign that a gas station had ever existed there. But as the sun set, the air began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from asphalt, but it was getting cooler, not warmer. And slowly, like a photograph developing in a dark room, Morrison's Sinclair station began to materialize. The green dinosaur sign flickered to life first, then the pumps, then the building itself, growing solid and real as the darkness deepened. By full dark, it looked exactly as I remembered it. Down to the half-open garage door and the flickering fluorescent lights. Earl was waiting by the pumps, like he knew I'd come back. "You shouldn't be here, son," he said, but his voice was different now, sadder, more tired than before. "It starts tomorrow. You don't want to be here when it starts." "What starts, Earl?" He looked towards the garage, and for just a moment, his careful composure cracked. "The collection. Every 7 years they get to expand their family, and this year," he met my eyes, "this year they need someone who knows the rules, someone who can warn the others." The terrible understanding hit me like a freight train. "You're leaving. My time's up. 40 years I've been here, keeping the rules, saving who I could. But everyone gets released eventually. Everyone gets to move on." He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "Question is, who takes over?" From inside the store I could hear movement, the shuffle of feet, the crinkle of plastic bags. The not customers were stirring, getting ready for another night of hunting. "There's always a choice," Earl continued. "Walk away now, and someone else will end up here. Some poor soul who stumbles in tomorrow night when the collection begins. They'll learn the rules the hard way, if they survive long enough. Or you stay, you take my place, you learn to exist between midnight and dawn, warning travelers, saving who you can. It's not living, but it's not death either. It's purpose." I looked at the garage. The knocking had started again, soft and pleading. "She's really in there, isn't she?" The woman from 1983. Earl nodded grimly. "She's the bait, always has been. That's their cruelest trick, using someone's desire to help against them. But she's not suffering. Not anymore. She's part of them now, part of the station itself." The knocking grew louder, more insistent. "Please! Someone help me. I can smell smoke." "Don't let them fool you," Earl whispered. "Remember the rules. No matter what you choose, remember the rules." I stood there in the parking lot of a gas station that shouldn't exist, listening to the pleas of a woman who'd been dead for 40 years, while a ghost who'd spent 4 decades protecting strangers offered me his job. The smart choice was obvious. Walk away, drive back to Phoenix, live my life. Let someone else deal with Morrison's and its rules and its hungry customers. But I kept thinking about all those forum posts, all those disappearances. all those families who'd never gotten answers about where their loved ones went. "How many?" I asked Earl. "How many people have you saved?" He was quiet for a long moment, counting decades in his head. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Hard to say. Time moves different here. Some nights no one stops. Other nights, he gestured toward the store where shadows moved behind the windows. Other nights are busy, and if I don't take over, they'll find someone eventually. They always do. But in the meantime, he shrugged helplessly. No one to give the warnings. No one to explain the rules. The collection will be larger this cycle. I thought about the Boy Scout in the store asking for a ride, about the woman with the Fritos staring with her all-black eyes, about the sheriff thing with too many teeth. Do the people they take, do they suffer? Earl's expression softened with something like pity. Not anymore. Whatever they become, it's not human enough to feel pain. Small mercy, I suppose. The knocking from the garage reached a crescendo, then suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard something else. Footsteps coming from inside the store. "They know you're considering it," Earl said urgently. "They can sense when someone's thinking about staying. You need to decide quickly, son. Once the sun rises, the choice is made. One way or another." Through the store windows, I could see all three not customers moving toward the door. The Boy Scout reached it first, his perfectly normal voice drifting across the parking lot. "Mister?" My mom's still waiting in the garage. She really needs that ride now. "Remember the rules," Earl whispered, and his form was already beginning to fade around the edges. "No matter what you choose, remember the rules." I made my decision. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm writing this from the same internet cafe where I first researched Morrison's, trying to get the story down before I forget the details. Because the thing about spending time between the living and the dead, it changes your memory, makes the real world feel less real, and the nightmare more like home. I chose to walk away that night, chose to let Earl disappear into whatever comes after 40 years of penance, chose to let Morrison's find someone else to tend the pumps and warn the travelers. But I didn't forget the rules. June 7th came and went. The collection cycle began, and for the first 3 nights, no one was there to give the warnings. I know because I monitored the missing persons reports. Phoenix PD, Flagstaff Sheriff's Department, New Mexico State Police. 3 separate families reported missing along Route 66, all last seen near mile marker 167. On the 4th night, I drove back. Morrison's was there, just as it had been, but something was different. There were more not customers inside. I counted 7 through the windows, all standing perfectly still, all wearing the clothes they'd died in. The Boy Scout was still by the candy display, but now he had company. A middle-aged man in a Suns jersey, a teenage girl with a college backpack, an elderly woman in a church dress. But there was no one at the pumps, no attendant, no Earl. I sat in my car for an hour, watching desperate travelers pull in, watching them enter the store without warnings, watching them break rules they didn't know existed. Some made it out. Some didn't. The ones who didn't, I watched them walk into the store as living people and come back out as something else. Their movements too smooth, their smiles too wide, their eyes reflecting light like an animal's. That's when I understood the real truth about Morrison's Sinclair Station. It's not a trap that catches random victims. It's a factory. A place that manufactures things that look like people but aren't. Things that then spread out along Route 66. Hitchhiking, asking for rides, knocking on doors in small towns across the Southwest. The collection cycle isn't just about taking people. It's about replacing them. I drove to the nearest town with streetlights, a little place called Cedar Ridge, population 847. I found the sheriff's station and told them about the missing families. Asked them to check mile marker 167. They found the cars, all 3 families' vehicles, parked neatly in the desert. Doors open, keys in the ignition. Empty. But they also found something else. Footprints leading away from the cars. Not toward the road, but deeper into the desert. Prints that started out human but gradually became something else. Longer. Narrower. With what looked like claw marks at the tips. The prints led to a cave system that the Geological Survey swore hadn't existed the month before. The spelunking team made it 50 feet in before they came running back out, babbling about rooms full of things that used to be people. The cave mouth was sealed with concrete the next day. Official report listed it as an unstable geological formation presenting a public safety hazard. But I know the truth. They didn't seal it to keep people out. They sealed it to keep things in. Morrison's Sinclair Station is gone now. I've driven mile marker 167 a dozen times since then, and there's nothing there but empty desert. The collection cycle has moved on, looking for a new location, a new attendant, a new set of rules, but the things they made over the years, those are still out there. Still hitchhiking along Route 66. Still knocking on doors in small towns. Still asking for rides, wearing the faces of people who disappeared decades ago. Earl tried to warn me about this in his way. The rules weren't just about surviving Morrisons. They were about recognizing the things that Morrisons had created. The hitchhikers with stories that don't quite add up. The stranded motorists whose cars are too clean, too old, whose clothes don't fit the decade. The children who move too smoothly and smile with too many teeth. Don't look at them too long. Don't give them rides. And if you hear knocking at your door in the middle of the night in some small town along America's forgotten highways, don't acknowledge it. Don't even look that way. The rules are the same everywhere. The attendants might change, the locations might shift, but the rules remain constant. They're written in the language of survival, passed down through whispers and warnings from one traveler to another. I'm telling them to you now, just like Earl told them to me. Don't let the chain break, because somewhere out there, in a place that exists only after dark, only when you need it most, there's another gas station waiting for desperate travelers. Another attendant ready to pump your gas and whisper warnings you won't want to believe. Another set of rules that might just save your life. Sweet dreams and safe travels. Story number 3. The last voicemail my brother left me was 47 seconds long. I've listened to it exactly 112 times since the FBI sealed everything that happened in Nome, Alaska last winter. Every time I play it back, I hear something new, something they don't want us to know about. Sarah, if you get this. His voice crackles through static that shouldn't exist on modern phones. Whatever they tell you happened here, whatever story makes the news, don't believe it. The Northern Lights aren't supposed to move like that. They're not supposed to. The message cuts off, always at the same spot, like something edited it. But here's what really makes my skin crawl. In the background of that recording, if you turn the volume all the way up, you can hear music, not normal music. It sounds like wind chimes made of ice, playing a melody that makes your teeth ache. Before I tell you what really happened in Nome, before I share what I found in my brother's apartment after they released his belongings, I need you to understand something. When the FBI seals records for national security reasons, they're not protecting the nation. They're protecting us from knowing that some things in this world don't follow the rules we've agreed upon. Some things don't care about our physics textbooks or our comfortable explanations. And sometimes, just sometimes, those things notice when we notice them back. So if you're listening to this late at night, maybe grab an extra blanket, turn on another light. because once you know what really happened during those 3 days in Nome, you'll never look at the aurora borealis the same way again. The story begins now. My brother Marcus worked for the National Weather Service in Anchorage. Boring job, he used to say, tracking storm systems, monitoring atmospheric pressure, sending out freeze warnings, the kind of work that keeps people safe but never makes headlines. Until that Tuesday in November, when everything changed. I was making coffee in my apartment in Portland when he called. 6 in the morning, my time, 3 a.m. in Alaska. "Sarah, they're sending me to Nome." His voice had this edge to it. Not excitement exactly, something else. "Okay." I balanced the phone against my shoulder while pouring cream. "Isn't that like routine for you guys?" No, this is different." I heard papers shuffling. "They're sending a whole team, atmospheric physicists, magnetic field specialists, even some guy from MIT who studies, get this, theoretical particle behaviors in extreme cold. Since when does the Weather Service need theoretical physicists?" "That's what I asked." He paused. "Sarah, have you seen the news about the aurora activity up here?" I hadn't. Between work at the veterinary clinic and trying to maintain something resembling a social life, I barely watched the news anymore. "It's been unusual." His word choice was careful. Marcus only got careful with words when something really bothered him. "The northern lights have been appearing every night for 3 weeks. But that's not the weird part." "What's the weird part?" "They're moving in patterns, geometric patterns, perfect spirals, triangles. Sometimes they form what looks like symbols. The Inuit elders in Nome are saying they've never seen anything like it. Some of them won't even go outside after dark anymore." I laughed. It seemed like the appropriate response. "Come on, Mark. You're the scientist. There's got to be a logical explanation. That's why they're sending us." But he didn't sound convinced. "Sarah, if something happens..." "Nothing's going to happen. You're going to go up there, take some readings, figure out it's some weird magnetic anomaly, and come back with a story to bore me with at Christmas." He was quiet for a moment. Yeah, you're probably right. Hey, I gotta go. Early flight. But Sarah?" "Yeah?" "I love you, kiddo." We hadn't said that to each other in years. Not since our parents' funeral. It should have been my first warning. Marcus flew to Nome that afternoon with a team of 12 scientists. Within 72 hours, only 3 of them would make it back. And those 3, they weren't the same. I know because I've met them. I've looked into their eyes. Whatever they saw in Nome, it broke something inside them. Something that can't be fixed. The first 24 hours in Nome were normal. I know this because Marcus sent me texts. Mundane stuff. Complaints about the hotel coffee. A photo of a moose in the parking lot. Jokes about how cold it was. Even for Alaska in November. But on the second night, the texts stopped. The last one came at 11:43 p.m., Alaska time. "Sarah, we found something under the ice. Calling soon. He never called." What I know about the next 48 hours, I've pieced together from 3 sources. The first is my brother's journal, which I found hidden in his apartment. The second is a series of photos on his phone that the FBI apparently missed. And the third is what Dr. Jennifer Park told me when I tracked her down in Seattle 6 months later. Dr. Park was one of the 3 survivors. When I found her, she was living in a studio apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant. She'd quit her job, changed her name. She was trying to disappear. But trauma, real trauma, it leaves a trail, and I've always been good at following trails. She didn't want to talk at first, stood in her doorway, looking at me like I was there to hurt her. But when I showed her Marcus's journal, when I told her I was his sister, Something in her face just crumbled. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They're watching. They're always watching now." But she let me in anyway, made me tea with shaking hands, and over the course of 4 hours, she told me everything. "The aurora that night," she started. "Your brother was the first to notice it wasn't behaving according to any known atmospheric model. The lights were descending, touching the ground in specific spots, always the same 7 locations, forming a perfect heptagon around the town." She showed me photographs on her laptop, images that made my stomach turn, not because they were grotesque, but because they were wrong. The aurora in the pictures wasn't like any northern lights I'd ever seen. The colors were off. Too many purples, reds that looked almost organic, like living tissue. We set up monitoring equipment at one of the contact points. She continued. "The ice there was different. It was singing. Singing? Resonating at a frequency that shouldn't be possible in frozen water. Your brother. He was brilliant. He figured it out first. The ice had been changed at a molecular level, restructured into something that was still H2O, but arranged in patterns that don't exist in nature. Patterns that looked almost like..." She stopped, stared into her tea. "Like what?" "Like circuits. Like the ice had become some kind of receiver or transmitter. That's when they decided to dig. Marcus's journal entries from that night are barely legible. His handwriting degraded with each paragraph, like he was losing fine motor control, or like he was writing in the dark, in a hurry, in fear. We're 3 feet down. The ice here is clear, perfectly clear. Can see something beneath. Mechanical? Number. Organic? Number. Both? Neither? Jameson thinks it's a meteorite, but meteorites don't pulse, don't respond to proximity. 7 feet now. It's definitely responding to us. Temperature readings make no sense. It's generating cold, not just being cold, generating it, like it's feeding on heat, converting it to something else. We broke through at midnight. God help us. We should have stopped, should have called it in, but we had to know, had to see. It's looking back. It's looking back. Dr. Park's voice pulled me from the journal. What we found. She was crying now, quiet tears that seemed more like an involuntary response than emotion. It was a structure, about the size of a school bus, but not made of any material we could identify. It was like frozen light, solid aurora, and inside. She stood up suddenly, walked to the window. Inside there were bodies, hundreds of them, perfectly preserved. But Sarah, they weren't all human. Some were, but others, they had too many joints in their limbs, or their faces were wrong, and they were all connected, thin filaments of that same frozen light, connecting them like a network. How old were they? The human ones? We managed to identify 3 before everything went wrong. One was a gold miner from 1898. Another was an Inuit woman who disappeared in 1962. The third. She turned to look at me. The third was wearing a uniform. Modern military. But Sarah, according to his dog tags, he doesn't disappear until 2027. My blood went cold. That's 2 years from now. I know. What Dr. Park told me next changed everything. Not just about what happened in Nome, but about the nature of what we were dealing with. There was something else in that structure, she said, walking back from the window. Something I didn't mention before. When we first saw the bodies, before they started waking up, your brother noticed patterns in how they were arranged. Not random, not chaotic, organized, like a filing system. She pulled up another image on her laptop. This one was a wide shot of the structure's interior, and she was right. The bodies weren't scattered. They were arranged in rows, in sections, like books in a library. Marcus spent an hour mapping it out before. She paused. Before he touched the central pillar. The arrangement wasn't chronological, it was categorical. All the artists in one section, all the scientists in another, teachers, leaders, children, even criminals. Each group perfectly preserved, perfectly organized. It's a collection, I whispered. Exactly. But not just any collection, a curated one. They're not taking everyone, Sarah. They're being selective, only taking representatives from each category. The best, the worst, the most unique. It's not random sampling. It's deliberate curation. She showed me more photos, close-ups of the faces. And I could see it then. The diversity, not just racial or ethnic, but psychological. You could see it in their expressions, even in death or suspension. The dreamer, the skeptic, the leader, the follower. Every type of human consciousness represented. But why? I asked. What's the purpose? That's what Marcus was trying to understand when he made contact with the pillar. Dr. Park's voice dropped to barely a whisper. And that's when we learned about the others. Others? Not just Earth. Sarah, this isn't their first collection. We found evidence of dozens of worlds, hundreds maybe, all preserved in similar structures, all cataloged, all studied. They're not destroyers. They're librarians. Cosmic librarians preserving the history of consciousness before it's lost to extinction. The room felt colder suddenly, not just metaphorically. The pattern repeats, she continued. A species develops consciousness, develops technology, reaches a critical threshold, faces extinction, and they arrive, always just before the end, always with enough time to collect, to preserve, to document. They've been doing this for millions of years. I thought about Marcus's journal entry, about seeing our own civilization already preserved, already collected. Dr. Park, I said slowly, if they can collect things that haven't happened yet, if time doesn't work for them like it does for us, then are we all ready? She nodded. Dead? Extinct? Possibly. Probably. We might be living in the echo of our own ending. The last moments before collection, stretched out across months or years to give them time to complete their work. That's when her phone buzzed with the unknown number. That's when she told me to leave. That's when I realized that knowing the truth, talking about it, made you visible to them, made you interesting. After leaving Dr. Park's apartment, I drove south, no destination in mind, just needed to move, to think. Marcus's journal sat on the passenger seat like a weight, pulling my eyes from the road. At a truck stop near Olympia, I finally stopped, bought coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, and read the rest. The final entries were different. The handwriting was Marcus's, but the words, they felt infected, like something else was bleeding through. Day 3, 0200 hours. They're showing us things, not with words, with thoughts. Images pressed directly into our minds, cities under ice, civilizations that predate the last ice age. They're collectors, preservers. They take samples before each extinction, before each reset. Day 3, 0400 hours. Jameson is gone. walked into the structure willingly, said he understood now, said we're the antibodies. Earth creates us to fight infection, but we are the infection. The Aurora. It's their catalog system, their way of marking what's been collected, what's pending collection. Day 3, 0600 hours. I can hear Sarah, even here, even now. She's going to read this, she's going to come looking. Sarah, if you find this, don't come to Nome. Some doors can't be closed once opened. Some things can't be unseen. The FBI will contain this, they have to. But containment isn't cure, it's just delay. The last entry was just coordinates, latitude and longitude. When I plugged them into my phone, they led to a spot in the Arizona desert, middle of nowhere. But I recognized the area. Our family used to camp there when we were kids, before everything fell apart. I should have gone home, should have forgotten everything, but grief makes you stupid, and love makes you brave. So I drove to Arizona. The location was an abandoned gas station, the kind you see in horror movies, pumps that hadn't worked in decades. Windows boarded up, but the boards on one window were loose, and behind them, tucked into a rusted mail slot, was a flash drive. The flash drive contained 3 things: a video file, an audio file, and a text document labeled for Sarah. I sat in my car in that dead gas station's parking lot and opened the text file first. Sarah, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it back. Or if I did, I'm not myself anymore. The structure in Nome is one of thousands. They're all connected. A network spanning continents, possibly planets. What we found wasn't invasion, it was taxonomy. They're cataloging Earth's biodiversity before the next extinction event. The one they've calculated will occur in 2027. The FBI knows, has known since 1952. Roswell wasn't about aliens, it was about finding one of these structures. They've been managing the information ever since, controlled disclosure, gradual acceptance. But Nome was different. The structure there was active, collecting in real time. I'm leaving you evidence, not to expose them. Exposure would only cause panic. But so you know, so you understand when the Aurora comes for you. And it will, don't run. Running marks you as aware, and awareness makes you valuable to their collection. Be normal, be oblivious, be human. I love you, Marcus. The video file was 40 minutes of handheld footage, shaky, dark, but clear enough. It showed the inside of the structure, the bodies Dr. Park had described, but also more walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at. That seemed to move when you weren't watching directly. And in the center, a pillar of that frozen light, with something inside it, something that might have been human once, or might have been trying to become human. But it was the audio file that broke me. It was Marcus, recording on his phone, his final hours in Nome. They're letting 3 of us leave. His voice was exhausted. Dr. Park, Reynolds, and Chova. They need witnesses, controlled witnesses, people who will return, file reports, be disbelieved, and then disappear. Standard protocol, apparently. A pause, sounds of movement, then, I volunteered to stay. Someone has to understand what they're planning. The 2027 date. It's not random, it's calculated. Based on our progression, our technology, we're approaching something, some threshold. And when we cross it, static, then a different voice. Not Marcus, but using his mouth. The collection must be complete before the transition. Your species shows promise, variation, resilience. You will be preserved, studied, perhaps reconstructed when conditions permit. This is kindness. This is conservation. Then Marcus again, fighting for control. Sarah, they're in my head now. Can't fight much longer. But I learned something. Something they didn't mean to share. The aurora, the patterns. They're not just markers, they're warnings to others like them. Stay away, active collection in progress. That's why the patterns have been changing, increasing. They're almost done, almost ready to... The recording cut off. I sat in that parking lot until the sun set, watching the sky, waiting for lights that never came. Finally, I drove back to Portland, back to my normal life, my normal job, my normal apartment. But normal is just a performance now. Because I know what's coming. I know what those patterns in the sky mean. And I know why the FBI sealed those records. I need to tell you about the others. The ones who came before Dr. Park. The ones whose stories I found buried in government databases and forgotten news archives. After Arizona, I couldn't stop digging. Couldn't stop connecting the dots. What I found was a pattern spanning decades. People who had experienced similar events. People who had seen the aurora behave in impossible ways. People who had found things under ice that shouldn't exist. 1987. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, glaciologist, disappeared during a research expedition in Greenland. Her final radio transmission mentioned geometric patterns in the ice formation and structures that don't match known crystalline formations. Her body was never found, but her equipment was recovered. The audio recordings were classified by the Danish government. 1994. Robert Castellanos, amateur astronomer from Fairbanks, reported aurora formations that spelled out mathematical equations in the sky. He published his photographs in a small scientific journal. 3 days after publication, he died in a car accident. The journal's entire print run was mysteriously destroyed in a warehouse fire. 2003, the Nunavut incident. An entire Inuit village of 47 people reported the northern lights coming down to earth like fingers. Emergency services found the village completely abandoned. No signs of struggle. No bodies. Just perfectly preserved meals on tables and children's toys scattered in the snow. The Canadian government blamed it on a mass hallucination caused by contaminated food supplies. 2011. Marine biologist Dr. Angela Chen found unusual ice formations during an Arctic research mission. Her notes describe bioluminescent organisms frozen in geometric patterns that couldn't occur naturally. She suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was institutionalized. The ice samples she collected were confiscated by military personnel who claimed they posed a biological hazard. Each case followed the same pattern. Discovery, documentation, disappearance or discrediting, and always the aurora appeared in the days leading up to the event, forming patterns, spelling messages, marking territories. What chilled me most was realizing I could trace this back, way back. Indigenous stories from across the Arctic, stories about the lights that steal people for the sky spirits, stories about star hunters who collect the best examples of humanity, stories dismissed as folklore, as primitive superstition. But they weren't superstitions. They were warnings, passed down through generations, kept alive by people who understood what the lights really meant. I found one account that particularly haunted me, from an Inuit elder named Anyu, recorded by an anthropologist in 1952. The same year Marcus mentioned the FBI first discovered the structures. My grandfather told me of the time when the sky dancers came down to our camp. This was many seasons ago, when his grandfather was young. The lights came not as ribbons in the sky, but as living things. They chose 7 from our people. The artist who carved the most beautiful figures from bone. The storyteller whose words could make children laugh or warriors weep. The hunter who could track any animal across any distance. The woman who could heal with just her touch. The child who could see tomorrow in today's clouds. The elder who remembered every story ever told. And the man who asked too many questions about things that should remain mysteries. They did not take them with violence. They came as light, as beauty, as wonder. And the chosen ones walked into that light willingly. Because to be chosen by the sky dancers is an honor, even if it means never returning to the world below. My grandfather said their camp mourned for many moons, but they also celebrated, because their people had been deemed worthy, had been selected to join the great collection in the sky, where all the best of every people from every time are kept safe, kept whole, until the world is ready for them to return. The anthropologist noted that Anu used the word collection in English, even though the rest of the interview was conducted in Inuktitut, as if that specific concept could only be expressed in the language of those who would eventually document it scientifically. As if they knew we would need that word, that understanding. When our time came, it's been 8 months since I found Marcus's files. 8 months of pretending everything is fine, going to work, meeting friends for coffee, dating a nice guy named Tom who thinks my biggest worry is whether to adopt another cat. But every night, I check the aurora forecasts, every night. I watch for patterns. 3 weeks ago, they started again. Not in Alaska this time, in Norway. Geometric patterns in the northern lights. Perfect spirals, triangles, symbols that make your eyes water if you stare too long. The Norwegian government says it's unusual solar activity. Nothing to worry about. But I know better. Last week, I got a package, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Marcus, standing in what looks like a medical facility. He's wearing a hospital gown. His eyes are open but empty. And behind him, barely visible in the shadowy background, is one of those things from the structure, standing perfectly still, watching. On the back of the photo, in handwriting I don't recognize, are 3 words: collection nearly complete. Tom asked me last night why I've been so jumpy, why I keep checking the sky. I told him I'm worried about climate change. He laughed, said I worry too much, made me herbal tea and rubbed my shoulders. He's a good man. He deserves better than what's coming, because I've done the math, based on Marcus's files, on the patterns, on the frequency of sightings. We have maybe 6 months, maybe less. And when it happens, it won't be invasion, won't be destruction. It'll be preservation. Some of us will simply vanish, collected, cataloged, stored in structures under ice, in frozen light, in spaces between spaces. Others will remain, the ones deemed common, unremarkable, left to face whatever extinction event they've calculated is coming. I wonder sometimes which fate is worse. The FBI contacted me once, 2 months after Nome. 2 agents in black suits who looked like they'd stepped out of a movie. They asked about Marcus, about what I knew. I played dumb, grieving sister who just wanted closure. They seemed satisfied. But sometimes I catch glimpses of cars that park too long outside my building. Sometimes my phone does things it shouldn't. Little reminders that I'm watched, that I'm managed. Dr. Park was right. They always know. There are signs now, signs I didn't notice before, or maybe signs that weren't there before. I've started keeping a log, documentation, because if this is really happening, if we're really living in the final moments before collection, then someone needs to record the progression. Week 1. Subtle changes. Animals behaving strangely. My cat, Mochi, stares at the ceiling for hours. Not at anything visible, but tracking something. Following movement I can't see. Dogs in the neighborhood howl at specific times each night. Always the same duration, always the same pitch. Like they're responding to a signal. Week 2. Technology glitches. My computer randomly displays files I've never created. Text documents filled with symbols that hurt to look at. My phone camera picks up lights that aren't visible to the naked eye. Geometric patterns in the background of normal photos. When I show them to Tom, he sees nothing unusual. Just lens flare, he says. But I know better. Week 3. Dreams. Not just my dreams anymore. I've started asking people casual questions. Sleep well? Any weird dreams lately? The responses are unsettling. Tom mentions dreaming about ice libraries. My coworker Sarah talks about frozen people who try to speak but their words come out as music. My neighbor downstairs describes being in a line with thousands of others waiting to be cataloged. Week 4. The temperature drops. Not outside, inside. Specific rooms in my apartment become inexplicably cold. The bathroom, the kitchen. Always the same rooms. Always 15 degrees colder than the rest of the space. No drafts, no logical explanation. But when I breath in those rooms, my exhales form visible clouds. Week 5. Time distortions. Clocks run differently in different rooms. I'll spend what feels like minutes in the cold bathroom, only to emerge and find hours have passed. Or the opposite. Long conversations with Tom that feel like they last for hours. But when I check the time, only minutes have elapsed. Reality is becoming elastic. Week 6. The voices. Whispers in languages I don't recognize. Coming from the walls, from the space between walls. Not audible, exactly. More like memories of sounds, echoes of conversations that haven't happened yet. Sometimes I catch fragments that sound like my own voice. Speaking words I've never said. Making promises I don't understand. Week 7. Others are disappearing. Not dramatically, quietly. People I know peripherally just aren't there anymore. The barista at my coffee shop, gone, but no one seems to notice. My dentist's receptionist, vanished, but the office acts like she never existed. When I ask about them, people look confused, as if they're trying to remember someone who's already been erased from their memories. Week 8. This week? This is the week everything accelerated. The week the patterns appeared over Portland. The week I realized I'm not just documenting the progression anymore. I'm part of it. But here's what terrifies me most. In Marcus's journal, in one of the entries I haven't shared, he wrote something that keeps me awake at night. They showed me the previous collections. Civilizations from Earth's past. Species we've never discovered. Humans, but not quite. And Sarah, we're in there. Our civilization, our cities. I saw Portland, Seattle, New York, all preserved, all empty, all from 2027. They're not collecting what was, they're collecting what will be. Time doesn't work for them like it does for us. Effect can precede cause. The collection is already complete. We're just experiencing the gathering. If Marcus was right, if time doesn't constrain them the way it constrains us, then maybe we're already gone. Maybe we're already preserved in those structures, experiencing our last months like a recording, like ghosts who don't know we're dead. It would explain why my dreams have changed. Why sometimes I wake up and, for just a moment, I'm somewhere else, somewhere cold, somewhere with walls of frozen light, surrounded by whispers in languages that predate human speech. It would explain why sometimes when I look at Tom, I see through him, like he's transparent, like he's already fading, It would explain why the aurora, when it appears now, seems to be spelling out words. Words in English. Words meant for me. Soon, Sarah, soon. I finished recording this story 3 hours ago, uploaded it to my computer, set it to automatically post if something happens to me, because 20 minutes ago, the aurora appeared over Portland. That's not supposed to be possible. We're too far south, but there it is, painting the sky in impossible colors. And it's forming patterns, a perfect spiral, then a triangle, then my brother's face, clear as a photograph in lights across the sky. Tom is still asleep. He doesn't see what I see, doesn't know what I know. I envy him. My phone just buzzed. Unknown number. The message is just coordinates. The same coordinates Marcus sent me. The abandoned gas station in Arizona. I think I'm being summoned. If you're listening to this, if this story found its way to you, then I'm already gone, already collected, already preserved in frozen light with my brother and the others who knew too much. But you still have time. When the aurora comes to your sky, when it forms its impossible patterns, don't look, don't wonder, don't investigate. Be blind, be ignorant, be unremarkably human. It's the only way to avoid the collection. Although, now that you've heard this story, now that you know, I wonder if it's already too late for you, too. Sweet dreams. And don't look up. Wait, do you hear that? That sound like wind chimes made of ice? Playing a melody that makes your teeth ache? Check your window. Check your sky. Are there lights that shouldn't be there? Patterns that don't belong? They know you listened. They know you know. The collection is never complete. There's always room for one more, especially the curious ones. The ones who ask questions. The ones who seek truth. The ones who listen to stories they shouldn't. The ones like you. Good night. And remember, when they come, and they will come, don't run. Running only makes you more interesting. And they're always looking for interesting specimens. Always. Story number 4. The manila folder on my desk shouldn't exist. That's what I keep telling myself as I stare at it. Thick, weathered edges curling up like dying leaves. The label reads, Friday Visits, Unborn Cases. My supervisor, Janet, dropped it off this morning with that same tight smile she always wears, the one that never quite reaches her eyes. Sarah, she said, placing her hand on my shoulder, you've been with Child Protective Services for what, 3 years now? 3.5, I corrected, already sensing where this was heading. Good, then you're ready for the Friday rounds. Before you think I'm crazy, before you close this video and move on to something else, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you is real, every word. And if you're listening to this late at night, maybe with your headphones on, trying to fall asleep, well, you might want to turn on a light. Because once you know about the Friday visits, you can't unknow them. And now, the story begins. The thing about working for CPS in Portland, Maine, is that you think you've seen everything. Neglected kids living in houses with no heat during February blizzards. Parents too strung out to remember they have children. The worst of humanity laid bare in case files and court documents. But the Friday visits, nobody talks about those. I found out why when I opened that folder. The first page looked normal enough. Standard intake form. Address, 1247 Brackett Street, apartment 3B. But where the child's name should be, there was just a series of numbers. 2019, 10, 15, NB. Never born. October 15, 2019. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped to the case notes. The handwriting changed every few entries. Different social workers over the years, but the reports were always the same. Child appears healthy. No signs of distress. Environment suitable. Toys remain in same position as last visit. Child does not interact. Mother continues to maintain nursery. Recommend continued monitoring. I looked up at Janet, who was still standing in my doorway. I don't understand. These are cases for children who were never born? She nodded slowly. Stillbirths, miscarriages, the ones that almost made it. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. The ones that still need checking on. That doesn't make any sense, Sarah. Her tone sharpened. Every social worker in this office has done the Friday rounds. It's part of the job, non-negotiable. You visit the addresses, you fill out the forms, you don't ask questions. She paused at the door. And Sarah, you never, ever touch anything in those rooms. The rest of that Thursday crawled by. I couldn't focus on my regular cases, kept flipping through that folder. 15 addresses, 15 children who were never born. Each file contained photos of empty nurseries, cribs with untouched sheets, toys arranged just so. But in every photo, something felt wrong, like looking at a room through frosted glass. Everything slightly out of focus except for the shadows. In each photo, no matter the angle or lighting, there were small shadows. Child-sized shadows, standing by the cribs, sitting on the floor with the toys. Shadows with no source. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those empty rooms, heard something that sounded like crying, but not quite. More like an echo of crying, the memory of sound. Friday morning came too soon. I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic outside the first address, 1247 Brackett Street, for 20 minutes before working up the courage to go inside. The building was one of those converted Victorian houses you see all over Portland's West End. Beautiful from the outside, probably worth a fortune. But something about it felt cold, even with the September sun beating down. The hallway to apartment 3B smelled like vanilla candles and old carpet. Normal. Completely normal. I knocked 3 times. "Come in," a voice called. "It's unlocked." The woman who answered looked exactly like her file photo. Rebecca Morrison, 34 years old. Lost her baby at 8 months. That was 4 years ago. "You must be the new Friday worker," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Sarah, right?" I nodded, throat suddenly dry. "Tommy's room is down the hall. Second door on the left." She turned back to the kitchen. "I'll make tea." Tommy. She'd named him Tommy. The hallway seemed to stretch longer than it should. My footsteps echoed wrong, like there were 2 sets of feet walking. The door to Tommy's room was painted bright blue, with wooden letters spelling out his name. Tommy. The M's were slightly crooked. I pushed open the door and froze. The nursery was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Crib with rocket ship sheets, mobile spinning slowly despite no breeze. Toys scattered on a playmat like a child had just been playing. But the room was cold, so cold I could see my breath. And in the corner, by the window, a shadow, small, child-shaped, watching me. I blinked and it was gone. Just trick of the light. Had to be. I pulled out my forms, hand shaking as I wrote, "Environment suitable, no signs of distress." But as I turned to leave, I heard it. Soft, almost imperceptible. Giggling. By the 5th house, I'd noticed the pattern. Every mother, and they were always mothers, never fathers, had the same hollow look in their eyes, like they were seeing something I couldn't, or maybe wouldn't. They all made tea. They all directed me to the rooms without following. And they all said the exact same thing when I left. "See you next month." Not goodbye, not thank you for coming, always, See you next month. The sixth address broke me. It was in Scarborough, just outside Portland proper. A small ranch house with an American flag out front and one of those wooden signs that said The Johnsons in cursive letters. Normal, so painfully normal, but the woman who answered the door, she was young, maybe 22. Her file said the baby, a girl named Emma, was never born 3 months ago. Fresh case. But this woman looked like she'd aged 20 years in those 3 months. Hair gone gray at the temples, hands that shook constantly, and her eyes kept darting to something behind me, following something I couldn't see. Emma's room, she whispered, pointing down the hall. Please, please don't wake her. The room was pink, soft, baby pink with white trim, a crib in the corner with a mobile of butterflies, and on the changing table, the baby monitor was on. The screen showed the crib, the empty crib, but the sound, breathing, soft, rhythmic baby breathing coming through the speaker. I grabbed the monitor, hands trembling, and looked closer at the screen. The crib was empty, completely empty. But the mattress had an indent, a small, baby-sized indent, like something invisible was lying there. Something touched my shoulder. I spun around, nothing. The room was empty, but now I could smell it. Baby powder, fresh, like someone had just changed a diaper. I ran, dropped my clipboard, left my pen, and ran. The mother didn't try to stop me, just stood in the doorway, that hollow look in her eyes, and said, "See you next month." I made it to my car and called Janet immediately. "I can't do this," I gasped into the phone. "Something's wrong with these houses, these mothers. They're seeing things that aren't there." "Are they?" Janet's voice was calm, too calm. "Or are you just not seeing what is there?" "Janet, please. Finish the rounds, Sarah. All 15 houses. It's important." "Why? Why is it important to check on children who were never born?" The line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, very softly, "Because they're still waiting, Sarah. They're still waiting to be born. And someone needs to make sure they stay that way." She hung up. I sat in my car for an hour, watching the house, trying to make sense of what she'd said. And then I saw it, in the window of Emma's room. A shadow, small, moving, playing with something I couldn't see. And behind it, another shadow, adult-sized, sitting in what must be a rocking chair. Rocking back and forth, back and forth. The mother, sitting in an empty room, rocking an invisible baby. Or maybe not so invisible. House number 10 changed everything. It was in Cape Elizabeth, right on the coast. One of those massive colonials with ocean views that tech money had bought up. The kind of place where everything should be perfect. But perfection, I was learning, was where these things like to hide. The woman who answered was different. Professional blazer. Hair pulled back in a tight bun. Eyes clear and focused. Her name was Dr. Patricia Chen, and according to the file, she'd lost twins 7 years ago. "You're early," she said, checking her watch. "The others usually don't come until after 3. "The others?" She studied me for a moment. "You're new to Fridays." It wasn't a question. "First day," I admitted. She nodded slowly. "Come in. But not to their room, not yet. We need to talk first." She led me to a home office lined with medical journals, psychiatry, neurology, and others with titles I didn't recognize. Journals of liminal studies, consciousness and quantum reality, the kind of academic writing that made my head spin. "Tea?" she offered. "Everyone offers tea." "It helps," she said simply, pouring 2 cups, "with the seeing." I don't understand any of this. Dr. Chen sat across from me, hands wrapped around her mug. What do you know about quantum consciousness? Nothing. In simple terms, consciousness, the observer, collapses possibility into reality. We see a thing, and it becomes real. But what happens to the consciousness that never fully forms? The ones that almost were? I stared at her. My twins, she continued, were alive for 6 minutes. 6 minutes in this world before their lungs failed. But for those 6 minutes, they existed. They had consciousness, awareness, and when they died, she paused. Where did that consciousness go? It stayed, Sarah. It stayed because I couldn't let go. None of us could. We kept their rooms, kept their clothes, kept believing, hoping, observing. And our observation, our refusal to accept the empty rooms, it kept them here, trapped between being and not being. My teacup rattled against the saucer as my hands shook. That's not possible, isn't it? She stood, walking to the window. Every Friday, a social worker comes, files a report saying the children are fine. The state's official documentation that these children exist. Legal papers, government recognition, and that recognition, that observation by the system itself, it makes them more real. Why are you telling me this? She turned back, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Because it's getting stronger. They're getting stronger. At first, it was just the shadows, then the sounds. Now, she pulled up her sleeve. Small bruises covered her arm. Tiny handprints. They want to be born, Sarah. Fully born. And they're getting angry that we can't give them what they want. A crash came from upstairs, then another. The sound of toys being thrown against walls. I should go check on them, Dr. Chen said calmly, like this was normal. You can see yourself out, and Sarah, whatever you do, finish the rounds. All 15 houses. If you don't, what happens if I don't? They follow you home. She disappeared upstairs, and I heard her voice, soft and soothing. Mommy's here. It's okay. Mommy's here. I left, but as I reached my car, I looked back at the house. In the upstairs window, 3 shadows. 2 small, 1 adult. But Dr. Chen lived alone. The twins had no father listed in the file. The twins had never been born. But there they were, playing, as real as shadows could be. I should have stopped. Should have driven home, quit my job, moved to another state. But Dr. Chen's words echoed. They follow you home. So I kept going. Houses 11 through 14 blurred together, each one colder than the last, each shadow more defined. By house 14, I could make out features. The curve of a cheek, the reach of small arms, the turn of a head following my movements. They were becoming real, and I was helping it happen. The 15th house wasn't on any map. The GPS kept recalculating, leading me down roads I'd never seen despite living in Portland my whole life. Roads that shouldn't exist. Until finally, I found it. A small cottage at the end of a dirt path, surrounded by trees so thick they blocked out the afternoon sun. No name on the file, just an address and a date, 19/7/08/15 NB, 37 years ago. The door was already open. Inside, the cottage was frozen in time. 80s furniture. Wood paneling. A kitchen with avocado green appliances. And dust. Layers and layers of dust on everything. Everything except the nursery. The nursery was spotless, pristine, like someone had just cleaned it moments ago. But it wasn't just one crib. The room was filled with them, dozens of cribs, each with a mobile spinning, each with an indent in the mattress. And in the center of the room, an old woman in a rocking chair. She looked up as I entered, and I recognized her immediately. Janet, but older. Much older. Like she'd aged 50 years overnight. You came, she said, voice barely a whisper. Good, they've been waiting. Janet, what is this place? The first house, she replied, still rocking. Where it all started. My daughter. She was never born. August 15th, 1987. But I couldn't let go. Couldn't accept the empty room. So I kept visiting, kept checking. And then I found other mothers who couldn't let go. I created the Friday rounds. The temperature dropped so fast I could see ice forming on the windows. I thought I was helping, Janet continued, giving them recognition, existence. But I didn't understand. They don't just want to exist in the shadows. They want to be born, truly born, and they need someone living, to trade places. The shadows began to move. All of them. Dozens of child-shaped shadows crawling out of the cribs, moving toward me. That's why we need the new social workers, Janet said, standing up. But as she stood, she flickered, like a bad TV signal. Fresh observers, strong life force, someone who hasn't been worn down by years of visits. You're not real, I gasped, backing toward the door. You're one of them. She smiled, that same tight smile from yesterday. I haven't been real for 3 years, Sarah. None of us have. The supervisors, the senior staff. We're all Friday cases now, checking on ourselves, maintaining the system. The shadows were closer now. I could hear them. Not crying. Laughing. The sound of children playing. Children who wanted to play forever. But you can stop it, Janet said, her form flickering more rapidly. Break the pattern. Don't file the reports. Don't complete the rounds. Let us go. But you said they'd follow me home. They will. But only if you run. Stay. Face them. Tell them the truth. What truth? That they were loved, that they were wanted, but that they were never meant to be. The shadows stopped. Waiting. Watching. I thought about all those mothers, the hollow eyes, the shaking hands, the desperate need to believe their children existed. And I thought about these shadows, these almost children, trapped between existence and void. You were loved, I said to the room, my voice shaking. All of you. Your mothers loved you so much they couldn't let go. But love, real love, sometimes means saying goodbye. The spinning mobiles slowed. The shadows wavered. You were never born, I continued, tears streaming down my face. But you were real. For moments. For heartbeats. You existed in hope and dreams and possibility. That's enough. That has to be enough. One by one, the shadows began to fade. Not disappearing, just softening, becoming lighter. And as they faded, I heard them, not crying, not laughing, sighing. The sound of finally being able to rest. Janet was the last to go. As she faded, she looked younger, like the woman who'd hired me 3 years ago, like the mother she'd been before grief froze her in time. Thank you, she whispered. And then I was alone, in an empty cottage, surrounded by dust and silence. I drove back to the office in a daze. The building was different, smaller. A note on the door said CPS had moved to a new location in 2021. 3 years ago. I called the number. A woman answered, a real woman with a tired voice and the sound of phones ringing in the background. I'm Sarah Mitchell, I said. I worked for CPS. Sarah Mitchell. She sounded confused. We have a Sarah Mitchell in our records, but she died 3 years ago. Car accident, the same day she was supposed to start. I hung up, but I didn't go home. Not yet. Something nagged at me. The first house I'd visited. Rebecca Morrison and Tommy. I needed to see if she was real. 2147. Brackett Street looked different in the late afternoon light. Warmer somehow. more alive. I knocked on apartment 3B. Rebecca answered, but she looked different. Healthier. The hollow look was gone from her eyes. Behind her, I could hear the sound of children playing. Real children, living children. "Sarah?" She seemed surprised to see me. "I didn't expect... Wait, how do you know my name?" I was here this morning, for Tommy's room." Her expression changed. Confusion mixed with something that might have been relief. "Tommy's room?" She turned toward the hallway, then back to me. "There hasn't been a Tommy's room for months. I converted it. Finally, it's my home office now." She invited me in, and I could see it was true. The nursery was gone. In its place, a bright office with a computer and filing cabinets. Photos on the wall showed Rebecca with a man I hadn't seen before. Wedding photos, vacation pictures, life moving forward. I thought I had. She struggled with the words. "After I lost the baby, I kept his room exactly as it was, for 4 years. But then one day, I woke up and realized he was gone. Really gone, and I was still here, still living. I needed to live." "What changed your mind?" "The strangest thing. I had this dream. This woman. She looked like you, actually. Told me it was okay to let go. That love doesn't mean holding on forever. It means accepting what is and what isn't." I left Rebecca's apartment with my head spinning. If she was real now, if Tommy's room was gone, then what had I experienced that morning? What had any of us experienced? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the others. I spent the next week visiting every address from the folder. What I found challenged everything I thought I understood about what had happened. Emma's mother in Scarborough was gardening in her front yard. She looked healthy, vibrant. When I asked about Emma, she smiled sadly but peacefully. "I planted a garden for her," she said, gesturing to a small memorial plot with a headstone no bigger than a book. "It helps, having somewhere real to visit, instead of pretending she's still." Dr. Chen's house was bustling with activity. A children's birthday party in the backyard. I watched from my car as she laughed with what appeared to be her very much alive twins. When she saw me, she waved me over. "Sarah, right? From the grief counseling group?" She looked confused. "I don't remember giving you my address." "Your twins," I gestured toward the children. "Adopted," she said, beaming. "After I lost my first pregnancy, my husband and I went through years of fertility treatments. Nothing worked. But then we realized there are so many children who need homes. We adopted Marcus and Lucy 3 years ago. Best decision we ever made." Every house told the same story. The mothers were real. Their lost children were really gone. But they had moved on. Healed. Found ways to honor their loss without being trapped by it. So, what had I seen in those Friday rounds? What had we all seen? The answer came from an unexpected source. A letter in my mailbox, written in my own handwriting. "Sarah, if you're reading this, then you figured out the first part. The Friday rounds weren't about checking on dead children. They were about checking on the living, on us. The CPS office closed 3 years ago when the Friday program was exposed. Turns out, it wasn't sanctioned by the state. It wasn't official at all. It was a support network created by a grief counselor named Janet Morrison, who lost her own daughter. She recruited social workers who had their own losses, who understood the pain. But something went wrong with the program. Instead of helping people heal, it became a way to avoid healing, to stay trapped in grief. The Friday rounds were supposed to help mothers process their loss gradually. Instead, they became a way to never process it at all. When the program was shut down, some of us couldn't let go. We kept coming back, kept performing the rituals. But the mothers had moved on. They'd healed. The only ones trapped in that cycle were us. You died in a car accident on your way to your first day at CPS. But some part of you, the part that wanted to help, that couldn't bear the thought of abandoned children, that part couldn't rest. So you joined the Friday program, not as an employee but as a client. Every Friday, you checked on the version of reality where those children needed checking on, where their mothers couldn't heal, where your job still mattered. Because the alternative, the truth that you never got to help anyone, that you died before you could make a difference, was too painful to accept. The other social workers in the program were the same. All of us lost something. All of us died in one way or another before we could finish what we started. So we created a reality where our work was still needed. But tonight, when you told those shadows they were loved but needed to rest, you weren't just talking to them. You were talking to all of us, to yourself. It's time to let go, Sarah. The mothers are fine. They've healed. Their children are at peace. And now, so can you. With love and understanding, Sarah. P.S. The manila folder was always empty. You filled it with your own need to be needed. But that need, it's not who you are. Who you are is someone who loved so deeply that not even death could stop you from trying to help. That's beautiful. That's enough. I put the letter down with shaking hands. Around me, my apartment began to change. The furniture I'd never remembered buying faded. The life I'd built for 3 years as a ghost dissolved like morning mist. But I wasn't afraid. For the first time in 3 years, or maybe for the first time ever, I felt complete. Through my window, I could see them. Other Friday workers. Other helpers who couldn't let go. They stood on street corners in empty buildings, performing their routines. But one by one, they were beginning to look up. Beginning to see. Janet appeared beside me, but not the flickering version from the cottage. The real Janet. Young again, peaceful. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded. "What about the others, the ones still trapped?" "Every story like yours helps free them. Every person who reads about the Friday rounds and understands the real message. It weakens the cycle. Some of them are already waking up. The rest will, in time. And the mothers? The real ones. They're living their lives. They've taken the love they had for their lost children and found ways to share it with the world. Some volunteer at children's hospitals. Others adopt. Some become teachers or counselors. Love doesn't disappear when there's no one left to receive it. It finds new homes. I thought about Rebecca with her office full of life. Dr. Chen with her adopted twins. All the real mothers who had found ways to transform their grief into something that helped others heal. That's what we were supposed to do too, wasn't it? I asked. Transform our own losses into help for others. Yes, but we got lost in the wanting to help. We forgot that sometimes the greatest help we can give is knowing when to step back, when to trust that people can heal on their own. The apartment continued to fade around us, but instead of emptiness, I felt fullness, completion, the satisfaction of a job finally finished. "Will anyone remember us?" I asked. Janet smiled. "The best helpers are the ones nobody remembers needing. Their success is measured not in gratitude, but in independence. In the people who get to move on because someone cared enough to show up, do the work, and then let go." As the world dissolved completely, I heard something I hadn't heard in 3 years. Silence. Real silence. Not the desperate quiet of held breath, but the peaceful silence of rest. Epilogue. The real Friday rounds. If you've made it this far, you might be wondering if any of this was real, if the Friday rounds actually exist, if there are social workers checking on children who were never born. The truth is more complicated than that. There are support networks for bereaved parents. There are grief counselors who specialize in pregnancy loss. There are organizations that help families process the loss of children who died before birth or shortly after. These are real, necessary healing services staffed by living people who do incredible work. But sometimes, in the spaces between official programs, other networks form. Groups of people so committed to helping, so unable to accept that their help has limits, that they create their own reality where their services are always needed. They're not malicious. They're not evil. They're helpers who can't stop helping. Fixers who can't accept that some things can't be fixed. Lovers who can't accept that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. If you work in helping professions, if you're a social worker, therapist, nurse, teacher, counselor, pay attention to your own need to be needed. Notice when your desire to help becomes more about you than about the people you're trying to serve. Learn the difference between supporting someone's healing journey and preventing them from taking that journey at all. And if you're someone who has lost a child, born or unborn, know that your grief is valid. Your love is real. Your loss matters. But also know that healing is possible, that moving forward isn't betrayal, that you can honor what was lost without sacrificing what remains. There are no Friday rounds checking on children who were never born, but there are Thursday morning support groups for parents learning to live with loss. There are Tuesday evening therapy sessions for people processing complicated grief. There are Wednesday afternoon volunteer opportunities for those ready to transform their pain into purpose. The real help happens in real time, with real people, in the messy, complicated, beautiful process of healing. It doesn't require supernatural intervention. It just requires showing up, doing the work, and trusting the process. And sometimes, it requires knowing when to step back, when to trust that love, once given, continues to exist even when its original recipient is gone. That the capacity to love and be loved doesn't disappear with loss. It transforms. It finds new homes. It helps others heal. That's the real Friday rounds. Not checking on what's gone, but nurturing what remains. Sweet dreams. See you next month. Actually, no, see you when you're ready. When you've done your own work. When you've healed enough to help others heal without getting lost in the helping. See you when it's time. And that time is up to you. Author's note. This story was inspired by the real experiences of bereaved parents and the dedicated professionals who support them. While the supernatural elements are fictional, the grief, love, and ultimate resilience of people who have lost children is profoundly real. If you or someone you know is struggling with pregnancy loss or infant loss, please reach out to organizations like SHARE, First Candle, or your local hospital's bereavement services. Help is available. Hope is possible. Healing, while never simple, is always within reach.